Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And boy, I appreciate you being with me. And I want to encourage you, since we are right here on the cusp of the end of January 2025, to take advantage of my two-book special, One Root, One Nation, All People, or One Kingdom. I forget the title. Sorry about that. It's a two-book special. If you go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, you order the book. Okay, I've decided, even though we got our inventory in, I've decided this. Okay, an executive decision. And my wife was going, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I just am." Okay. I had made the offer since we ran out of inventory of that particular book, One Root, almost immediately. I made the offer that if you go ahead and order the book, since a lot of those orders would have to be on back order while we waited for inventory to come in, that I would include a free copy of Can God Tell Time? Well, guess what? I've changed my mind. So between now and the end of January 2025, U.S. orders only, for anyone and everyone, okay? Not just those who ordered while we were out of stock, but for anyone and everyone that orders One Root, Into All the World Then Comes the End, I'm going to give you, as an additional piece of literature, my book, Can God Tell Time? Now, that's going to save you well over $20, okay? So please take advantage of that. You've only got a couple of days left, about 3 days left if my calculation is correct, okay? Like I said, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to calendars. I just kind of go my way and I do my thing, and it's like, "Oh, it's Tuesday. Oh, yeah, okay." Okay, so as I promised yesterday, and don't forget, I won't be able to be with William tonight on Two Guys in the Bible. Uh, as I mentioned to you yesterday, my wife's brother passed away suddenly, totally unexpectedly. Uh, he had been in a hospital, had been taken there on an emergency. They treated him. He was doing exceptionally well. She spoke to him on the phone that morning, and he said, "I feel absolutely fantastic." The last thing they ever said to one another as they hung up was, "I love you." And she got the call that afternoon. He had passed away. I mean, just boom, he was gone. Really, really sad. Very, very tragic. So, anyway, we will be with the family for the funeral and the get together and all of that. So, I will not be able to be here for Two Guys in the Bible. Anyway, so as I promised you yesterday, I want to share with you today something from Daniel chapter 12 that Daniel said would take place at the time of the end. Now remember, Daniel 12 is the source of Matthew chapter 13 and Jesus' prophecy and prediction of the harvest at the end of the age, the fulfillment of Sukkot at the end of the age. And in order to set the stage here, let me share an anecdote with you. Some years ago, I was on a radio talk show hosted by a lady. She was an ardent dispensationalist. And she literally just was astounded as she interviewed me, and she had me on her program several times. And she would ask me some very good questions, and I would answer them. And she would just go, "I just can't believe what I'm hearing. This, on the one hand, it sounds good, but that's not what I believe." And she would very commonly say, "Look, I've got to study this. I've just never heard this before. It really does sound good." So one night, she was asking me some questions. And she decided to take a really firm stand. And she says, "Now look, Don, I've got you pinned now. I know you're not correct. I know that the end of the age was not in the first century, because Daniel chapter 12 said at the time of the end, knowledge shall be increased." And she said, "Don, are you not aware That knowledge, our knowledge database in our world. Now, look, this has been 15, I don't know, many, many years ago. I don't even remember how long, but it was a long time ago. She said, Don, are you not aware that our knowledge database is doubling every, day, hour, whatever? She said, that's got to be proof that we're living in the end time. How do you respond to that, Don? And she was very complimentary. She said, you're an awfully smart guy. And she said, I've never met anybody like you, but she said, I've got you on this. I said, well, I don't think you have, as a matter of fact. And we were able to joke and kid with one another. I said, was Jesus talking about the time of computers and the knowledge of science, the knowledge of math, the knowledge of space, the knowledge of medicine, all of that being increased? Or was Daniel being told about a certain kind of knowledge increasing in the time of the end? Now, let me set the stage for what I think is incredibly important for understanding Daniel chapter 12. There was virtually a unanimous consensus among the ancient Jews that after the writing of the book of Malachi, the inspired office of prophet ended. Prophetic knowledge, prophetic understanding, prophetic revelation came to an end. Now, they believed that from time to time, God would be with a certain individual here or there or whatever, but they never considered those individuals to be inspired to the same level as the Old Covenant prophets. For instance, the Maccabees, they understood that Daniel was a prophet, but they also understood that there were no prophets in their day, which kind of destroys the idea that the book of Daniel was written in the time of the Maccabees, don't you think? So here are the Maccabees saying Daniel was a prophet, inspired of God. And on the other hand, they said they had to wait for the arrival and the arising of a true prophet of God. How did that work if they didn't continue or consider Daniel to be a true prophet, which they called him? So, once again, there was the view within Israel among virtually all of the leading rabbis. Prophecy, the prophetic office, inspiration, prophetic understanding had ceased with the writing of the book of Malachi. But wait a minute. Joel said, Joel chapter 2, 28 and following, it shall come to pass in the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall dream dreams. What? There's going to be a cessation of the prophetic office. However, in the last days, the Lord said, I'll pour out my spirit. And there will be vision, there would be prophecy once again. And then you've got this incredible prophecy of Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are determined to seal vision and the prophet, or prophet, not the prophet. There's no definite article there. And a great, great, great host of both Jewish and Christian commentators understand this to mean that by the end of these 70 weeks, the prophetic office, remember, that would be restored in the last days, would now be sealed up, meaning it would come to an end by the end of these 70 weeks. By the way, folks, If you say that the end of the 70 weeks was in 34, 35 AD, if you say that it was with the stoning of Stephen, then that means inspiration and prophecy ceased in 34, 35 AD with the end of the 70 weeks. See, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So I hope you see what I'm saying here. Daniel foretold the time in which knowledge would be increased in the last day, in the time of the end. But prophecy would end until the last days. That would mean that in the last days, yes, prophecy would be restored. The prophetic office would be restored. And guess what? John the Baptizer was the prophet Elijah. And Jesus said, Matthew chapter 11, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? Did you go out to see John the prophet? Yes. There's never been a greater prophet than John. He was full of the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb. Luke chapter 1. You know, it seems to me that commentators very, very often miss the absolutely incredible significance of the appearance of John. I wrote a book on this, Elijah Has Come, a solution to Romans 11, 25 to 27. Because technically speaking, with the appearance of John the Baptizer as Elijah, that meant that the last days had officially begun. And remember, that prophetic office had ceased with Malachi. Folks, do you catch the power of this? So the prophetic office, once again, had ceased with Malachi, but would be poured out in the last days. And here is John, a prophet full of the Holy Spirit, who appears. It means the last days had begun. And then you come forward to Acts chapter 2, approximately 3 years after the appearance of John. If you want to say 3.5, that's fine. And what happened on the day of Pentecost? Well, they were all gathered together with one accord, and suddenly there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as a fire. And suddenly a sound of a rushing mighty wind filled all the place where they were assembled, and they began to speak with other tongues as the Holy Spirit gave them utterance. What's happening? Well, they were accused of being drunk. Peter stood up and says, Men of Israel, hear these things. These men are not drunken as you suppose, seeing it's but the third hour of the day. This is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. It shall come to pass in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh. That doesn't mean the last days began that day, because here's John as a prophet prior to the day of Pentecost. 3.5 years prior to the day of Pentecost, he was a prophet. And Daniel 9 implicitly taught that the prophetic office would be restored within the 70 weeks, but terminate by the end of the 70 weeks. And so here is John, full of the Holy Spirit, in fulfillment of Joel. Here are the apostles in Acts 2 being given the baptism of the Holy Spirit in fulfillment of Joel. What's happening here? The prophetic office that had ended with Malachi was being restored. Now watch this. That means prophetic understanding and prophetic revelation was being restored. Now watch this. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, Jesus was speaking to his apostles. He's just told them the gospel would be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations. Now watch this. Watch this. In Mark chapter 13, as Jesus tells them that the gospel is going to be preached into all of the world, he said, you're going to be brought before kings, before governors, before Sanhedrins, give no thought to what you shall say in that hour, for in that hour the Holy Spirit shall give you what you shall say, and they will not be able to confound the words that you speak. What? They will be given inspiration. They will be given inspired knowledge. The knowledge that had ended with Malachi. And you see, their going into all of the world would be after the day of Pentecost of Acts chapter 2, when they were given the baptism of the Holy Spirit. So now Jesus is telling them, okay, you're going to get the Holy Spirit. You're going to go and you're going to preach. You're going to make knowledge to increase. Now, back to Matthew chapter 24. Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, now watch this, let the one who reads understand. Look, folks, they did not understand Daniel. From the time Daniel was given, Daniel himself, when he received his revelation, said, I heard the vision. I did not understand. Twice he says this. He says it in Daniel 10. Now he says it in Daniel chapter 12. I saw the vision. I did not understand. But guess what? Daniel foretold the outpouring of the Holy Spirit for knowledge to be increased. Joel said that the baptism of the Holy Spirit would be poured out to give prophetic understanding, to restore the office of prophet. And here's Jesus speaking to his apostles who received that baptism of the Holy Spirit. And he tells them, after the day of Pentecost, when you go and when you preach, and then, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, let the one who reads Daniel understand him. Why? That's because Daniel was foretelling the time of the end. And Jesus is telling them they would understand those prophecies that they had long read, long perplexed about, and they would finally understand. They were living in the last days. They were living in the time for the fulfillment of all of those Old Testament prophecies that foretold the last days, and that foretold the eschatological resurrection and the fulfillment of Sukkot. Boy, I hope you can catch the power of this. The beauty and the harmony of this narrative is incredible. Okay, thanks for joining me. Hey, go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Take advantage of the 3-book special for this month. It's ending, I think, tomorrow. Isn't that right? Save yourself over $20. Order the books. I'll see you on the flip side.